Hello, my name is Donna Marie, health coach, yogi, and death doula. And today is Death Doula Day. We'll be discussing the role of a death doula, how we became death doulas, and we'll also share tips with you on how you can prepare for your end of life. The goal today is to encourage you to embrace your whole life in order to live fully and die peacefully.
Welcome, Adrienne Burke. Adrienne, I met through our Going with Grace training. We are both death doulas, and today we want to talk to you about what it means to be a death doula and a whole lot more. Wait a minute, we're also yoga teachers. And so we're not only talking about what it means to be a death doula, but how the yoga and the death doula part work together. So
Thank you.
thank you for being here.
I'm excited to be here. I love having these conversations. So thank you for inviting me.
But let's just start by talking about what a death doula is and what we do. And
Sure.
so
Yeah.
you can go ahead and start.
Okay. Well, my disclaimer will be that I'm, very new to the death doula space. I completed my training in December. So it's, this is all very fresh for me. And, I'm continuing to learn and continuing to read and study and define what a death doula is to me, because I do think that there are different approaches to the work. But essentially, the way I understand it in a nutshell is, we are non-medical end of life support. So, we're not taking the place of nurses or doctors or anything like that, but we are there to provide emotional support, but also not in a therapeutic way. We're not licensed, therapists or counselors, but we're just there to be a support system. I mean, that's kind of how I think about it. It's a wraparound support system, and whatever that means for the person who's facing this transition or their family and what they need. And doulas do a variety of things, from like literally helping around the house to things like helping plan a funeral service or doing a legacy project. There's a lot you can do. I don't know. Does that kind of
Yeah,
resonate with what you think of the work?
absolutely. I like to call us a loving presence. We
Hmm.
are there, we're not there to guide an individual, and the way it reminds me of yoga. I'm a Bikram yoga teacher. And
Mm-hmm.
with Bikram yoga, we recite or um, share the same dialogue every single class. You can ad lib a little bit, but I'm not just a new death doula, I'm also a new yoga teacher. And
Same.
so, me ad libbing doesn't happen. I stick to the script. However, I realize that when you're with a person who is approaching their end of life, they're not interested in your opinion about how to do this death thing. We are there, like you said, as an emotional support, as a loving presence, as a listener. And as we're listening, we could potentially gather information that would be helpful as the person is transitioning. Also, what you said is we provide support by working with morticians, financial and estate planners, whatever the person who is dying needs of us.
Right.
And I think part of our responsibility is to figure that out, what the need is, how
Right.
to bring peace, how to bring, even sometimes that could be working with the family to help them understand the needs, recognizing that the family is experiencing anticipatory grief.
Mm-hmm.
And so they may not know how to manage or may not even want to because it's so difficult to help with managing the emotional support of their loved one. And so
That's
we're there
right.
to support the family and the person who is soon to depart us.
Yeah, I think that's really the heart of it is listening. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from the training we did with Going with Grace was how much it's emphasized to ask questions. You know, we're not there to presume that someone needs something. We're really there to ask the questions, to listen, and then act accordingly. You know,
Yeah.
we're not there to impose what we think or what we would want or what our cultural background would do. You know, we're there to ask questions and listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And to learn, you know, during COVID-19, death became my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the deaths we saw from Ahmaud Arbery,
Mm-hmm.
you know, George Floyd, the COVID deaths, the numbers that we were presented with every day as they were growing and growing and growing. And then I decided to start a walking meditation, although at first, you know, everybody was afraid to even go outside.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided I needed to get out of this apartment and I needed to be in nature. When I got out, I started noticing all the bird sounds and the beautiful flowers, the trees, but mostly I was noticing the dead and dying flowers. And it was as if I was drawn to them. As I took pictures of dead and dying flowers, really death began to speak to me. And I just started thinking about all of the experiences I've had in the past with loved ones who have passed
Mm-hmm.
away. I started thinking about their memory. So their legacy started becoming meaningful to me. And then a year after that meditation walk started is when I became a death doula. Those flowers, nature, you know, it really spoke to me and changed my life. I started paying attention to the moon cycles. Everything changed for me. And I started recognizing the importance of stillness. You and I were talking about being still a minute ago, and you mentioned how the world is opening up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so share a bit about your thoughts regarding being intentional as we not go back to the normal, because who wants to do that, right?
Right, 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 right. Yeah, gosh, I love that story of how this work found you, or you found the work. Um, there's so much I could say about what you just shared, but yeah, something I experienced a lot during the pandemic as well, and I can share what got me into the death doula stuff separately because of something that happened during COVID. But I being intentional, you know, the pandemic was, I had just moved to a new city by myself where I don't, literally 2 weeks after I moved here to Miami in a new job. Um, that's when the world shut down. And so I also had a lot of time to myself. And it was the first time probably in, you know, 15 plus years that I had so much time to myself. And, um, you know, despite the awful nature of the pandemic and all the people we've lost and whose lives have been impacted, you know, a blessing I think of it was that it did force everyone to stop
Yeah,
and slow down, including me. And I became really grateful for that. And I was hopeful that we would collectively learn some lessons from that. And I think we are, you know, like work is really changing and the nature of work and working from home. And, you know, there's some things around that space that are kind of shifting, but lately I have found it is sort of this just general rush to go back to how it used to be.
yeah,
And I've found myself falling into that too. You know, my schedule's getting busy again. I'm not having the time to meditate, to read, to reflect, to just be quiet that I had during the pandemic. And so I haven't found that answer yet. I'm trying to figure out, what that balance is because I haven't forgotten that lesson.
yeah.
It's just how do we integrate it now? And the form of yoga I really love and that I'm just starting to teach virtually, and then I'm hoping to do it, you know, in person as time progresses, is restorative yoga.
Hmm.
Um, So kind of the opposite of Bikram, which is like very active and vigorous. Restorative, literally, you don't do much. And within an hour's practice, you might only do one or two postures because it really is about kind of going offline and resetting your nervous system and just being still. And that's really hard in our culture to do.
Yeah.
So it's so needed. And I'm trying to figure out how to do it for myself. You know, it's like a daily journey.
Yeah, I think people are recognizing the need to be still more. But you're right, how to incorporate that. And I guess that's where we come in, yoga teachers and people who lead meditations. That's where we come in as a leader to help people,
Mhm.
um, you know, because it's so important. I will say prior to COVID, I knew the need to be still. My internal voice kept telling me, sit your ass down, stop moving, you know, relax, you know, and
Yeah.
even, you know, I would go on a vacation thinking that was relaxing. No, don't move, just be still and listen. I am trying to speak with you. I'm trying to guide you. I'm trying to calm your nervous system. I need to be your restorative yoga right now. Listen. And
Right.
and I kept moving. I kept moving. And inside, I won't say I was miserable, but I was really not happy. And again, I wasn't unhappy in life, but
Mm.
inside I was not satisfied because I lacked the clarity and the focus I really needed. And then when COVID happened and I was forced to be still, I learned, like you, a valuable lesson that I never ever want to lose.
Hmm.
And like you said, as we're opening up again, it is it's becoming a challenge. And and both of us, we don't want to lose the lessons we gained because it was life changing.
It was. Yeah. Truly transformational for
Yeah.
me.
So tell me a bit more about your journey, your COVID journey. So you moved to Miami, 2 weeks later, the world shut down, and you've shared this story with me, but I think if you don't mind sharing it, I think people would really benefit from hearing it.
Yeah. So I will say I've always had a interest in I wouldn't say it's death, but one of the things I do in my professional day job is historic preservation. I'm an urban planner, and that's my specialty. And within that, one of my further specialties is historic cemeteries. And so I love cemeteries. I have since I was a kid. I'm very comfortable in cemeteries. I find them very peaceful and reflective. They are a place where you can kind of find that stillness. I love to think about all the stories of the people who came before us and the legacies in the community. And so I've always been very comfortable, I guess you could say, among the dead. Um, the dying is very different, as I'm
Yeah.
learning that, you know, dying is not the same as dead, totally different. So this is a new realm for me, but um, so yeah, a couple weeks after I moved to Miami, the world shut down, and then several months later, I faced a life-threatening health emergency, and not related to COVID, but I had a bleeding stomach ulcer that I didn't know about, and I woke up one morning and I just felt weird, and my heart rate was very high, and I just felt kind of dizzy. And that was my only symptom, but I knew something was off, and I went to the hospital. Long story short, I was bleeding internally very, very rapidly. It was very, very serious. And I was hospitalized for several days and had blood transfusion, it was very serious. And that kind of was the first time, you know, I had just turned 40. So I also celebrated this milestone birthday alone during the pandemic, and then
Yeah.
had this emergency, and I just had time while I was in the hospital to reflect on, wow, if I hadn't listened to my body and the symptoms and just thought, oh, I just don't feel good or whatever, like I wouldn't be here.
Right.
Um, so it really caused me to confront death in myself. And then it made me reflect on some family members who had passed, who were really important. And I had heard Alua Arthur, who leads Going with Grace, the training we did. I'd heard her on a podcast, a couple months before that happened, and that work just kind of stuck in my head, and I just started really thinking about it. And after I got better, it took me a while. It took me months to get better because I had really severe anemia as a result of all the blood loss. Um, I I was just like, I'm going to live my life. Life is short. Life
Yeah.
is very, very short. It is precious and it is short, and you don't know. Literally the day before I had felt fine. And I mean, so I was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I pursued yoga teaching because I love yoga. I always wanted to do that. And I felt really called to this death work. Um, And so, yeah, I did yoga teacher training first, and then I did the Going with Grace course after that. And I'm very interested in that intersection, but it became really important to me. Uh, it's like you're saying about the flowers, or it's like it found us.
Yeah.
There wasn't just like this. I didn't approach this from a academic, like, oh, this would be a good line of work.
Right.
There's it finds us.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how it found me.
And I will say to anyone listening, like no particular educational background is required.
Mm-mm.
Just a willingness to be a loving presence, a willingness to face your own inevitable, death,
Mm-hmm.
and to really ponder on that and come to terms with the fact that one day you and I will die,
Yep.
and determine if you have what angst you might have with that, and work that out before you can work with anyone else. But it
Yeah.
really does just require a person who is willing, with a loving and open heart, to be present for someone who is. It's the most honorable work, though.
Mm.
Like, well, I'm glad you listen to your body.
Mm.
That's really part of being still, that you were able to listen to your body and actually take the right action, not go to the store and say, oh, I'll get some Pepto-Bismol, or I'll
Yeah.
do this to doctor myself. You listened, and I'm so grateful because you're going to do amazing work.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You're
You
welcome.
too. Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to this is not a product placement for Apple Watches, but my I really credit my Apple Watch for saving me, because I'm familiar with my heart rate because of using that watch and when I exercise. And so to be able to see what my heart rate was that day, I was like, wow, that's not my normal heart rate
Yeah.
range. And that was really what I was like, I have to go to the hospital. Something's very wrong. So shout out to my Apple Watch for its
Yes.
heart rate function.
So maybe I need an Apple Watch.
And, I'm a big believer in them now.
Yes. Have you prepared your end of life plan and communicated it with your healthcare proxy, and the person you designated to make decisions for you in the end of your life?
Yeah, I have. And yes, that's like, if anyone takes away anything from this conversation, it's like, do your end of life planning early. Don't wait till the last minute. Yes, actually, after having been hospitalized, I was like, I have to update everything.
Yeah.
So, I updated my will and all my healthcare proxy forms. I reached out to the people who were included and let them know. Yeah, so I did all of that. need to do it again. It's kind of like, I really think it's sort of like an annual exercise. I should go through and double check and remind everyone where everything is.
Yeah.
Um, Something I've not done and I hadn't even thought about until we took our class, and I still haven't done it, is all the digital world stuff. Like no one knows how to get into any of my digital stuff, my accounts, and that's something I need to set up. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah. How about you? Have you done all that too?
I have, and I have a conversation with my children regularly. The one thing I have not, the digital part of it, I don't have in writing. But honestly, my daughter's face opens my phone. Like the Face ID, her face is on my telephone. Everybody knows the password to my computer. Um, and so in that sense, I'm pretty transparent, but I don't have it written down. So I do need to work on that as well. And I do have a document of all of my creditors, all of my accounts, but not all of the passwords. But
Mm-hmm.
again, they can open anything. They have access to everything. So yes, my end of life planning for the most part is all done. I just don't know where I want to be buried.
Mm.
And I want a green burial, and there's some green burial cemeteries in this area, and I haven't visited them yet. And so I look forward to doing that because I've not been to a green cemetery. I want to have conversations with the people who manage the green cemetery. So that's one thing I haven't done that I really want to do really soon.
Oh yeah, I encourage you to, because that's something else I did. As part of the planning, I was like, well, I need to find where I want to go. And I'm an only child with not much extended family, and I am divorced. So like I don't have like an obligation to be buried somewhere, like my family doesn't have like the legacy cemetery where everyone goes or whatever. So I was like, well, where am I going to go? So I also have always really been interested in green burial. And so living in Florida, I've lived here for a very long time. There is a conservation cemetery near Gainesville, Florida, where I used to live. And it's really incredible. Conservation cemeteries are amazing. Because not all green burial cemeteries are also conservation cemeteries. So
Mhm.
that's a distinction. So I sent in my intention form to be buried there. And then finally last fall, I had a chance to visit and talk about, contemplations on your own death. Nothing gets you to do that more than visiting what you've selected as your final resting place. It was a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
I did the tour with the people who work there, and they led me around. And then after we were done, I just went back and sat on one of the benches and sat there for quite a while and just kind of meditated on, this is the last place I'm ever going to go.
Yeah.
Um, it was extremely powerful. So yeah, I would love that experience for you. I think you would really find it very meaningful.
Talk about the conservation cemeteries and how they differ from, because the cemetery here in Virginia, um, there are green burial. There's an area for green burials, and then there's a traditional cemetery as well in the same cemetery. So,
Mm-hmm.
talk a bit about what a conservation cemetery is.
Yeah. So, uh, I guess an easy way to say it is like a conservation cemetery is green burial, but a green burial is not necessarily a conservation cemetery. So, green burials, just for anyone who's not familiar, are completely natural. So, traditional cemetery burials involve, you know, typically people are embalmed. Um, they are then put in a casket that is made of whatever type of wood and probably has some metal on it. And then most traditional cemeteries also require a concrete vault liner. So you're in your casket and then you're put in a concrete vault and then you go in the ground. So it's like very environmentally taxing. And there's a lot of resources that go into a traditional burial. So green burial doesn't do any of that. So green burial is people are placed into something that is biodegradable. So some kind of biodegradable casket, wood, cardboard. Some people are just directly in a shroud. They might not even go in a casket. No concrete vault liners, no embalming. Um, it's it's how we always have done it as humans.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's if humans were buried and that was the choice that culture utilized, that's how it would have been done, right? I mean, we don't, all
Right.
that other stuff is only since the 19th century. So, that's a green burial. A conservation cemetery kind of takes it a step further, and it's also, um, it actively involves land conservation. So it takes that kind of environmental stewardship aspect up a notch. And the lands that conservation cemeteries are on are protected by conservation easements. They also, like the one that I'm going to, um, they're actively involved in managing and restoring that ecosystem. So where it was previously farmland, they're actively working on replanting native plants to make it a more, make it how it used to be, the natural ecosystem. So that's why you can't pick your plot, is because they're constantly moving to different parts of the land and doing these active ecosystem restorations. The other thing that's pretty cool is that it is also an conservation area open to the public. So there are all sorts of trails, and you can, take your dog and walk through the trails. So, and it will be that way in perpetuity. That land is protected in perpetuity as conservation land. So, there are not very many cemeteries that, meet the standards of a conservation cemetery, because again, it's doing that level, the level above just green burial. There's another purpose to that cemetery,
Yeah.
basically.
That's beautiful. The whole purpose of that is really beautiful.
Yeah, it's really cool. If that's like, if I could have another job, I think that would be like the coolest place to work.
What would be a good death for you? How do you define a good death?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is something we had to think about as part of the class, and
Yeah.
I had not really thought about it before. I mean, I guess it's something I'm still kind of reflecting on. I would say either quick. I would like it to be quick. Like either I don't know it's coming. But the downside to that is then you don't have the chance to say goodbye, which,
Yeah.
made me think that I think I would like that opportunity. But still not prolonged. I think a good death to me would be, it's not something I would want to prolong. I don't want to be in a hospital. I'm not so set on like, oh, it's going to be in my home and I'm looking out a window. I mean, ideally, I'd love to be surrounded by nature in some way.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know where I'll be. I mean, that's like, I don't know where I'll be when it happens. So I don't have specifics about the setting other than nature of some kind, but not a hospital.
Yeah.
Um, that was one of the hardest things for me to see and learn in our class, was how many people die in the hospital and what that looks like. We had to watch some documentaries and things on what that looks like. And that was really hard to watch. Um, I just don't think that's a good death.
Yeah.
So I do not want that.
Yeah. For me, the documentaries and the films we looked at, what stood out to me the most, or rather, I would say what I learned, is that a good death for me would be me being accepting of whatever state I'm in.
Mm,
So the backdrop here says best life of well-being. My well-being, my being connected to the core of who I am, um, being grateful. And, I have no idea what it's like to be in constant pain. But,
mm,
you know, even through whatever I'm experiencing, being grateful, um, being able to recognize the lesson I should be learning through that process, looking forward to the transition or the transcendence. Um, and a good death to me would also be surrounded by loving people. No, I don't want to be in a hospital either. And that's the importance of end of life planning, because though you don't know what your body will be experiencing, you don't even know what your mind will be experiencing, but you can actually be proactive and creative with the way you set up a plan to determine who you want around you. And what I call it is your circle of love, who you want your circle of love to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you're an only child. And so you don't have a legacy cemetery, or, and you live in Miami without your family being there with you. And so how would you create that? I'm the same way here in Virginia. My children don't live near me. My mother doesn't live near me. And I don't have this clearly planned out for myself, but I want to create that circle of love. People who know, okay, I'm counting on you to be there. Um, and they agree to be there. They want to be there. And I think it's important to have a lot of death doula friends.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But a good death would be just for me to be able to be present and accepting of whatever is to come.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I think that's really an amazing goal, and who knows that's the thing. No one knows, like no one knows
Right.
what we're going to go through when we get to that point, even though everyone will go through it. But I think that's really beautiful. I think, yeah. And being surrounded by people that, yeah, I would not like to be alone. I mean, I think that's a way I don't want to be alone. I love that organization. I forget the exact name of it, but it's something like No One Dies Alone or something, but it's like a
Yeah.
volunteer organization.
Yeah.
I think that's just the most beautiful gift. Um, you know, the thought of people that was something that really broke my heart about the entire COVID-19 thing, is that how many people did die alone. They were not able
Right.
to be, even if they had that circle of people, they could not be with them. And that just absolutely breaks my heart to think about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I really like that, just to be present. Again, that kind of like accepting. And that's very yogic,
It
that's a
is.
very yogic practice, just acceptance. Um, and it's really hard to do,
It
but
is hard to do. I think
I love the
back,
intention.
right, right. I think back to when I had my daughter, just giving birth to her. And I was a military spouse, and I had traveled to a couple states, and I didn't do the Lamaze training in time, but I wanted to have her, I wanted the birth to be a natural birth, but I didn't take any training on breathing, but I really wanted to do it. When the time came, I was in too much pain, and I kept thinking to myself, this is painful. And so then I couldn't do it, and I didn't, right? I didn't have the right coaches around me. Um, the person who was there to support me was like, darling, this is too hard. You can't do this, rather than saying, come on, let's breathe. So I didn't have the right coaches in place, and I couldn't do it. And so the reason I share that story is because you said it's very hard. In order for me to be present in my end of life, I need to be practicing that today and every
Mm,
day, in order for that to be a reality when that time comes. Otherwise, I'll repeat the same thing, that I did when I gave birth to my daughter. The medication, I'll be medicated. I will need help and assistance that will take away from me being present.
yeah.
And that's okay for some people. That isn't necessarily what I want for myself. And I'm not saying that I'm against medication either. What I'm saying is that my state of mind is really important. And that's where the yoga comes in. And that's where the
Mhm.
stillness and the quietness and the connecting to your core of who you are, your beliefs and your values. And even that is hard because we don't make the time to really remain connected to that.
Right. I think that's right. And I think just this, I think one of the really important things about death doulas is just the fact that we're talking about it too, you know, that this is something we're all going to face. And because I think that is where so many people, you know, or I'm speculating because again, I don't know, but I think in our culture, a lot of people's suffering at the end of life is connected to this idea that it's like a surprise or, well, this isn't supposed to happen to me,
Right.
or we don't talk about this and now it's here. So no one, no one is emotionally prepared to be going through that experience because nobody talks about it. And so it's almost like when it comes, it's extra confusing, it's extra hard. And so I think some of the work of death doulas is to, you know, this just challenging people to think about it, because I think it's, and I think that's also a regular practice. If you are regularly reflecting on mortality, which some people find morbid, but I actually think is the opposite. I think it makes you have a more rich and fulfilled life.
Absolutely.
Then when it comes, it's like, okay, well, this is what happens. You know, I mean, I think that, and I think that's a regular practice.
Yeah.
And that's how I've always felt visiting cemeteries too. Like, you know, a lot of people think it's weird. And, but I have always found it to be kind of like a reflection on mortality. It's like, you know, I always leave a cemetery grateful for my life and that I'm still living and what do I want to do with it. And, I think that's really the opposite of being morbid. It's like,
Yeah.
makes me more present. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's also a practice
Yeah.
that we have to do.
The majority of people are on autopilot anyway,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
47% of the people are walking around just doing what they've always done, not questioning it. And, um, and that includes us. I'm not excluding
Hmm.
us. There are times when we're just in that autopilot mode and we have to shut it down. And we
Yeah.
have to be intentional. We have to connect with ourselves and whatever it is we believe. Nature is a great way to connect with myself, like for you as well.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
The last question I have is, what is one thing we can leave people with to start preparing for their end of life? What is one thing a person can do today to get started?
Um, I mean, it sounds very basic, but I think just acknowledging to yourself that this is coming and it's something we need to do, no matter how old you are. I mean, that's the thing. It's never too early to do this because we don't know what's coming. Um, so I think, you know, there's the obvious action steps like having a will and having the conversations with your family. But I think even more basic than that, because our culture is so, opposed to having these conversations and facing this reality, that just kind of admitting to yourself, you know, this is something I need to plan for.
Yeah,
Um, just like we would plan for anything else, you know, it's like the ultimate plan.
yeah,
So yeah. And
yeah,
I think that's hard for people to acknowledge.
yeah. It's the completion of the plan. It's the period at the end of the sentence. It's the, begin with the end in mind concept,
Hmm.
because we can plan our careers and we can plan our families and we can plan all these things. But if you're really never thinking about your end of life, all of that is really incomplete to me.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
You're not, it's not a big picture plan.
No, no, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not.
So for
What would you
me,
say?
I
Yeah.
would say, talk about it. Not just with yourself, but talk to your family. Um, Talk about death. Make death a normal conversation. Death and dying a normal conversation. And so not just thinking about it But what helps you to think about it even more is talking about it, engaging in conversation with other people. Like, where would you like to be buried? Or, you know, um, do you ever think about one day you will die? Make the conversation normal. And I think another thing I find that's very, very important, I've had conversations with people and they tell me they have all their end of life stuff together. And I remember the last conversation, the gentleman said to me, and it's all in this binder. And I'm like, so where's the binder? And he's like, it's in my file cabinet. I'm like, does your family know where the binder is? And make sure, have those conversations about where things are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another one thing people can do is just write it down, um, and make sure your journal isn't like a private journal that you don't want anyone to see. Keep it on your table and let everyone know these are where I'm writing my thoughts, or any way to communicate. But talking about it to me would be the one thing people can do. Just talk about it.
Yeah, I
And
couldn't agree
I
more.
think that's one of our main purposes is helping to normalize death conversation.
I think so. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that talking about it is like, that's the huge first step.
Yeah,
Um, just and it does help normalize it. I mean, this is something we all have in common. Every one of us,
yeah,
regardless of who you are. So how can we get ready?
yeah. And many of us, we spend our lives avoiding thinking about death, talking about death, and then at the end of our lives, we're constantly pursuing ways to extend our life.
Yep.
So whether it be through whatever means of medication and and therapies and whatever it is we're doing, we are continuing our life by ignoring the fact that one day it's going to end.
Yeah.
And rather than preparing, we in other words, we're resisting it all our life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we get to it, we don't know how to handle it, or we are still unaccepting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where regret comes in, and grief for the family is impacted even more because we're not accepting and enjoying one another and making the most of the time we have one now while we're healthy and alive, with the thought that one day this is all going to end.
Mm-hmm.
COVID, not just COVID, but in life, things change constantly. So death is happening constantly.
Yes.
It's not just when we are physically not here anymore. Death is happening as the seasons change. We can see death in every aspect of our lives. And so death is always around us, it's always happening. And yeah, normalizing the conversation. The hope for me is just that we help people to recognize that it's not a bad thing. It is part of life, and energy never ever dies. For me, green burial is being deliberate about keeping that energy alive. I don't want any part of me destroyed through any part of me destroyed. I want me, my whole body, physically just placed back into the earth to continue the nurturing and the energetic connection. And yeah, I believe being a death doula is being an activist. We are here to change the way people talk about death, think about death, and the way people live their lives.
I here. I
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up because yeah, you've said it beautifully. I love that. I love all of it. I couldn't agree more.
So, as we wrap it up, will you share with people how they can find you on social media as you're, growing in your death doula and yoga career? How can they find you and reach out to you if they're interested?
Yeah, so I'm not super great at keeping up with my Instagram, but my Instagram is at Sanctuary and Solace, spelled out, all three words. And my other Instagram, which is my day job, but I'm really actively trying to figure out how to fit all this into my day job, is at Histories Matter, like spelled out Histories, IES Matter. Um, I'm very interested in this intersection of well-being and how we integrate that into our daily lives. So I'm kind of trying to do some explorations around that in my day job life too. So either one of those places, yeah.
Well, I look forward to your growth and just following you and continuing to connect with you. I really appreciate you taking the time out to be with me today as we celebrate Death Doula Day, and you have an upcoming birthday, right?
I do, yeah, just in a few weeks.
So happy birthday in advance.
Thank you. Thanks. I
Have a
appreciate that.